Thank you very much. Real quickly, so as an instructor at the U.S. Army War College, it is true I get to deal with senior command. So in my class, I only have lieutenant colonels and above for Army, Navy, Marines. So when I look out and I see a sea of young faces, you know, it inspires me. But what also inspires me is when I hear stories, and as a journalist for the past 30 years, I've interviewed a lot of folks in our military from all different wars. And when you have living history like this, and as a history major, and I know in classes you guys have to read a ton of stuff and literally fall asleep reading it, because some of it doesn't translate for you. You know, you don't smell it, you don't see it, you don't hear explosions. None of that is real. It's just words, it's stories, and sometimes it gets a little long. Been there, trust me. But when you hear people in front of you and you talk to people, it's living history. And you sit there and say, well, we tell you it's the greatest generation, and I look out and see you. Who's to say you're not the greatest generation? And for these older folks who are up here now telling you about what happened to them, they were exactly your age. 18-year-old, 19-year-olds jumping on boats, being told to go overseas, told to fight in a war. They may not have understood the implications. Maybe they didn't understand the historic value or what was at stake. All they knew is they were being told to fight, and they were going over there. And I've yet to meet anybody who was engaged in any battle prior to it that were beating their chest, eating meat, saying, bring it on. They were terrified. Terrified. And then when the battle starts, they were still terrified. But what they did, instead of running from the battle, they ran toward the battle. And they were gallant and heroic in their efforts, and that's why we can sit here now and sing their praises about what they've done in previous battles. So I encourage you, when you have this opportunity, not just to hear warriors of the past, but just go up to them, listen to their stories, and wait. When you hear them pause for a second, that should tell you something. That means it's harder for them to talk about. Folks coming out of World War II, you have to pry out of them what took place in Korea and Vietnam. They don't sit there and just tell you what happens. They don't necessarily want to share it. So when they do share it, it's a valuable tool for you, because as warriors of the future, you're going to go forward. This is all stuff that you can put in your shed as sharp tools that will help you along the way. And I hope you find these. I'm sitting back there thinking, oh man, I wish this was, I knew about this, I'd be here all day. It's an amazing tool for all of us. Anyway, with that said, let me introduce to you James McEachin. Both of these men are going to sit here and talk, and I'll let them talk as long as they want, but we can also ask them questions and sort of feel out what it was like as a young man going into battle. But their histories, their backgrounds are interesting in themselves. James McEachin, for instance, Silver Star, multiple wound Purple Heart veteran of the Korean War with a distinguished background. He has done so many things after the war: author, actor, a character to be sure, and a great person. We just met outside, and he's a lot of fun to talk to. He's had award-winning novels. I mean, the guy has pretty much done it all in his lifetime. So for Mr. McEachin, a round of applause. Thank you. And Vincent Okamoto, he was born November 22nd, 1943, to an American family of Japanese origin and interred during World War II. I know you studied this. You know, we rounded up Japanese in this country because we didn't know what else to do. We were attacked by the Japanese in Pearl Harbor. The knee-jerk reaction was we thought anybody Japanese was a threat to our nation. Rounded them up and put them in internment camps. Stripped them of everything they had, took their jobs, took their livelihood, and put them in these camps. To come out of these camps and be a warrior for the United States military, I mean, that speaks volumes. And his family was rounded up and put in a camp in Arizona. And following graduation from college, ROTC, became a second lieutenant in the U.S. Army, and after that he went to Ranger training and was ordered to Vietnam. August 24th of 1968, serving as a platoon leader with an infantry unit, had the defense of a fire support base under heavy attack, for which he would be awarded the Distinguished Service Cross. Also awarded the Silver Star, Bronze Star, and Purple Heart with 3 oak leaf clusters. Obviously, Mr. Okamoto is a hero. Both of you gentlemen have microphones on. Let's start with you, Mr. Okamoto, if you wouldn't mind. If you just give us sort of a background of what inspired you to join the military, and then tell us about your military service and the kinds of things that just forever are with you, both good and perhaps bad.
I'm the 10th child and 7th son born to Japanese immigrants. All of my 6 older brothers served in the military. The 2 eldest served in World War II with the Naval 442nd Regimental Combat Team. Another brother volunteered for the Marines and fought in the Korean War. As a kid, my older brothers were my heroes, and I couldn't wait until I was old enough to follow in their footsteps. So when the Vietnam War started heating up in the mid-'60s, I kind of thought that was my opportunity to prove myself, go off to war, and come back and being able to stand with my brothers and drink beer with them as an equal. I think most people that have ever experienced combat will tell you it's not what you imagined it would be like. Vietnam was a different world. It was a special universe with its own rules, heroes, and villains. It had its own vocabulary. After serving a year in Vietnam, they called the jetliner that would take them home, they referred to it as the Freedom Bird, because they felt that they had been locked up for a year. They referred to America, their home, as the world. The counterpoint being that Vietnam was such a strange place that was not of this planet. And they also said that gravity didn't exist in Vietnam. You stayed on the ground because the whole country sucked. But again, because of my older brothers, because my mom and dad, who came from the samurai family in feudal Japan, were born in America. And one of the things I'm most proud of as far as my parents, having lost everything and having been interned and locked up for over 3 years, they were not bitter. And because we came from a samurai family, I said, as warriors, if there is a war, you go to war. And my 6 older brothers, again, all went into the military, so in my case, I felt I had to do it.
What was an experience you had that you'll never forget, both good and bad? I think it's important, especially for young sailors and servicemen, Army, and I got to be careful with all the branches. I'm used to Army, so I apologize. So all the branches, you have a lot of young, shiny faces out here, and all of them. I mean, it's heroic just for the fact that you're going to serve our country. I mean, I tip to the hat to you. But I think it's good for them to hear an amazing experience, something really bonded the brotherhood, and also a horrible experience that just really made you question what you were doing and why we were doing it.
I was 23 years old when I went to Vietnam as a young platoon leader. And at the time, the rhetoric of John F. Kennedy really was of value to me. And I felt we were doing the right thing. And I felt that America was at war, that we had to defend the country against the communists. So I volunteered for Vietnam. When I got to the field, being a second lieutenant in the infantry in Vietnam was a status crime. It was almost like being a child molester. The men in your platoon, 19, 20 years old, but they'd been in country longer than me. They had more experience than me. And that was normally the case for any young second lieutenant that joins the platoon. And the new guys were called FNGs, fucking new guys.
If you need to clean that up, it's friendly new guy.
That was what they were. That was what I was. And they were disliked and feared because an FNG, because he was ignorant of the ways of the jungle, could walk you into an ambush, could set off a booby trap that would kill him and everybody else around him. He'd walk past a bunker without recognizing it. So again, an FNG really was a threat. And until that FNG proved himself under fire, he was treated as a pariah. No one wanted to really get to know him and be friendly to him because he posed a danger. And also, most of the grunts in Vietnam, if they were going to get killed, it was in the first 2.5 months when they were ignorant. The bad thing about the war was just about the time they knew what they were doing, where they became jungle-wise. It's time for them to go home. They would rotate home. So in Vietnam, there was a revolving door with no great reservoir of experience. There was a gentleman named John Paul Van, who was a very famous advisor in Vietnam, who said, We didn't fight a 10-year war in Vietnam. We fought a 1-year war 10 times. And I think there's merit to that statement. Again, I was not treated with open arms when I reached my platoon in the field. No one really talked to me. The only one who I conversed with was my RTO, my radio telephone operator. He had to talk to me because he was always with me. After my first firefight, after my first wound, things started to get better. And there's an old saying in the military academy and all the other military institutions with ROTC, not to get too friendly with your men, because you're going to have to order them to do things that would probably get them killed. That's really good advice, but it's very hard to follow. As a second lieutenant, young, 22, 23 years old, you do become friends with your men. They start showing you pictures of their girlfriends. They share cookies that they got from their mom. They tell you about their future hopes and dreams. And you grow to love these men. You grow to love them maybe more than your own biological brothers. And for you young people here today, with the understanding that you're embarking upon a path that will be difficult and at times fraught with danger. And the difficulty will be not just for you, but your family. But I think all of the veterans here will extend their gratitude and respect, because you're going to be defending our country. In some circles that may sound corny, but that's what you are. You're defenders of our country. And even as I speak now, there are young men and women very much like you that are staying their posts in remote corners of the world, protecting us from those who would do us harm.
I remind people when I speak, especially to civilian-based people, I said, I know you love going down the street and getting your double cappuccino Swiss latte that's whatever, gluten-free. I said, you have the freedom to do that because of young men and women like yourself who suit up, go out there and defend our nation. And the folks who are a little ahead of you, who've been doing it, and the folks ahead of them, and in this room you're filled with decades of it. I mean, that says something right there. The preservers of our freedom sits in front of us. James, let's talk about what you did in Korea, which has been called the Forgotten War, which, can you imagine serving, losing friends, fighting for something, then getting pulled out, only to be told years later by historians it was the Forgotten War? Tell us a little bit about your experience, especially because you served at a time when this country, was just coming off of World War II. They didn't have the real lust for battle. They didn't necessarily treat the warriors the way they should have treated them. Tell us about your experience, why you signed up, and what your experience was.
Well, yeah, 3 or 4 things mixed up there. The first thing is when I enlisted in the Army, it was simply because of the fact that my brother-in-law came home one day in 1946, I think it was, and he had on this uniform, which to me looked almost like it was something from another world. I mean, he had not the ribbons as Mr. Yamamoto has on here, but it was an Army uniform, and my God, just to be a part of that magnificent institution called the U.S. Army, if I had the opportunity to do so, I would do so until eventually I reached my 17th birthday. And the first thing I did was to go down and find someone that could tell me how to join the Army. And I ended up on Whitehall Street in New York, and went through all the exams, etc. And before you know it, found myself in Fort Dix, New Jersey, ready to take up the position in the world as a soldier. And there was something magical about being, and I find it today, being called a soldier. You caught me at a particularly sensitive time because I've just returned from Korea 2 weeks ago. I was invited over there by 4-star General Brooks, who was the commanding officer of our troops on the Korean Peninsula. He thought I needed to come over there to get a little R&R But when we first, the plane touched down at Incheon or something like that, something strange enveloped me, and I didn't realize that I was so sensitive to war. But let me backtrack a moment and say that I've written a couple of books, two of them having to do with the military, Farewell to the Mockingbird. I'm not here to plug the book, but it's to tell you about how it was at the time during that period to talk about blacks in the military, which you really can't do until you talk about the day that you became, that the Army decided that it would foster this thing called integration. I was particularly happy with the outfit that I was in, and so I didn't think that it was necessarily the right thing to do was to be with the whites or with their company or something like that. And so I eventually wrote a book about it. Now to jump forward again to talk about going back to Korea, I didn't realize that I would be so frightened, or these memories would come back from the Chorwan Valley, and they did. And I remember going up to the 38th parallel, the line there, and Panmunjom and all of that, when all of those things were occurring about the Korean War. And later that night, when we got back to the hotel, I almost started going to pieces because having seen those things, and it was a little bit too much for me to take.
If I can stop you, what kinds of things were flashing in your head? And were these things that you just kind of had put away and turned the page on?
Well, I was one of these guys who full of braggadocio and about you can do anything, go anywhere, be anything that you wanted to be, etc. But I didn't know that there was something kind of pulling you back, yanking you back to yesteryear. And excuse me, that was those feelings that I had in Korea. I mean, you'd wake up in the middle of the night earlier when you got home, screaming and carrying on, and your wife would be afraid of that you want to do something a little dangerous. And so eventually you deal with it, and it's all over. What had happened, I was kind of seriously wounded. And I was saved by a young blonde-haired boy who was just miraculous in the way he saved me. I was wounded in 3 different places. On the left thigh and the right thigh, and then I had a bullet wound here, which I still have shrapnel of the bullet here in my chest, or between the ribs. And you could see that explosion. Wow. You could see him saving you over and over again. And as I write, or as I've written in the screenplay that I've written about the incident, that it still hog-ties you to that one night where you were just, you were almost a goner. And then it affects a lot of other things that you do, such as you important religion. You appeal to God, and anything else it's something to reach out and to hang on to. Next question.
What would you say would be the most powerful message that you can pass along to the young people in front of you today about serving and also about war?
I think what I would say is that you have to be extraordinarily proud of what you've done. You have to be proud, or you should be proud of having served with all of its faults. This great thing called the United States of America. We're going through some awfully troubled times at this moment. But what you have, and I was talking to a couple of the young guys last night, to see how ready they are, how prepared they are to surrender, to give all, to defend this country, with all of its faults, it's just a magnificent thing. So be proud of what you do. Nobody's going to have a welcoming mat out for you when you come back, and some of your friends won't even know that you've gone in place. And to a large extent, they don't care. But there's something that's inside of you that says, my God, did I do that? Did that such and such a thing happen? It is just wonderful to be able to say, I defended the United States of America. A thing that brings us to forward, too, is that in Korea, again, we're talking about the period where the Army wasn't even integrated at the time. They would look at a black soldier, and in Japan they would do the same thing as, you really didn't exist, or who are you? Not exactly what planet you're from, but who are you, And you say, I'm an American soldier. At least your attitude tells you that. So I would just say be proud of who you are, and then it's no bed of roses, but you'll look back and you'll say, my God, it was a wonderful thing that I did was to join the service. I am 86 years old. I couldn't possibly think of even coming close to thanking God for the life that I've lived if I wasn't able to inject this thing called serving in the United States Army.
Vincent, let me ask you the same question. What is it that makes you most proud today, given all that you have experienced, that your family's experienced? What is it about your service that has made you so proud, or something that continues to just make you very proud?
It's the men I served with. Vietnam, as you know, was very unpopular. And so for the young men who were sent to fight in Vietnam, it was tough on them. Some had girlfriends who said, if you go to Vietnam, forget about it, because I think it's a bad war. At UCLA, at the LTC field, you'd see guys carrying signs that say draft beer, not students. And you would see women with signs that say, girls say yes to men who say no. It was a bad war. I think the fighting and dying in every conflict is pretty much the same. You're away from your home, your loved ones, your family. You're scared, you're always tired. But in Vietnam, the hard thing was sitting down and talking about, should we be here? Is this a necessary war? Is it a moral war? And those questions, to a large extent, are still relevant today. But I'm so terribly proud of the men I served with, 19, 20-year-olds, some high school dropouts, who were willing to fight for this country. Most of these guys in the infantry were not brain trusts. They couldn't type. They couldn't drive a truck or bake a cake. They were put into the infantry where it was kind of the bottom of the barrel as far as intelligence and qualifications. So long as you could pull a trigger, you were welcome in the infantry. They led the most wretched existence that you can imagine. 7 days a week, no holidays off, the monsoon season where it rains on you for 4 months, and it's really difficult to have a cigarette because it'll just turn to mush.
They're bad for you anyway.
Back then, I wish I had bought Stockton Marlboros because
Waterproof Marlboros would have gone a long way.
even if you didn't smoke, if you've been in the jungle for about a month or so, you see friends being killed, maybe they got a piece of your tail. Smoking was something everybody actually did. But again, I cannot explain to you just that bond that I formed with the men in my platoon and the men in my company. They were magnificent. And they knew what they did was not just thankless, but in some circles wrong. But they continued to fight. And they did it not for some cause, not because of the eloquence of Richard Nixon or Mom's apple pie. They fought and they risked their lives and they bled because they didn't want to let their buddies down. And that is something that I've never been able to see replicated in civilian life. So those of you who are wearing uniforms, understand that your goals are not going to be the big house or the fancy car. You're going to go into an institution where you will become supervisors of controlled violence. And hopefully you won't, but in all probability, you're going to see the obscenity of war. You don't know that yet. But I want to thank you and tell you how proud that I am of you. Because, our society, some men are lionized for their great wealth, or their political power, or their social position. Some are renowned for their athletic ability. Others are accorded celebrity status as film stars and rock icons. But of all the titles in the world, the proudest is that of veteran, because it refers to an individual who is willing to give up everything for America. So folks, all you young people, give yourselves a big hand. Thank you.
Let me get the same thoughts from you, James, if we could, and then we'll open it up for some questions because we got to keep things on track.
Okay, one of the things I'd like to say, and was just touched on, you will not always be appreciated for what you do. Even here in the military, those who are in the military will not even, they can be so shallow in their thinking that they don't even think. We have a thing called Memorial Day that occurs every Memorial Day here for some reason. But I've given speeches before members of Congress and for baseball stadiums, you name it. And not once have I ever been called upon to do it for the military here. Even launching the USS Michael Murphy, which I was a soldier in wearing my 47 uniform, the Korean War uniform. The people in the Navy weren't necessarily enthralled to see me here because of the fact that it should be the Navy that's honoring the Navy. But they were wise enough, I think, to choose me to be a part of the ceremonies. But I started to mention the Memorial Day concert. I have tried, or my assistant have tried for years to have me to participate in that, but yet and still, whoever the powers that be are, they simply won't do it. And simply wouldn't allow me to go on to say what I wanted to say. Earlier I said something about, you asked me about what were some of the things that I was thinking about, some of the things that you think about that cause you to be in the position that you are. I opened my screenplay up with, and by the way, this is not my first time writing. I wrote with even Spielberg, his first screenplay. They never shot it. No, he never shot it. But it just shows you the wide acceptance that you have as a writer. I opened the screenplay up with the guy's conscience talking to him, James, going through the tossing and turning in bed. And his opening line, as his conscience says, James, why are you going through this? Why do you put yourself through this? Don't forget, when you go to war, I, as your conscience, I go to war with you. You must stop that. And then we go on about further explaining what the guy's problems, what his problems are. It occurred to me that my lieutenant, who led us in the patrol, on this assault patrol, that he made a mistake. I know I shouldn't even go there. Let's just say that the confusion that you have in your mind whenever you get close to going back to the war zone, it doesn't let up. It continues to be there.
Okay. How about some questions now? And you can just speak real loud. Do you need a microphone? Everybody okay if somebody speaks up?
Oh, it has to be taped.
Oh, it has to be taped? All right. You want to throw that microphone down over here in the front, right here? Should I have a Nerf microphone that we can just toss? So we just... Yes, ma'am.
So, with both of you receiving multiple Purple Hearts, and with a nation now that actually says the flag, it's just a flag, what do your Purple Hearts mean to both of you individually?
Go ahead.
I think the person that desecrates a flag, whatever this person does to the flag, you should do it to him, or Congress should kind of have something to say. If you step on my flag, even Jesus knows that you should be stepped on. You see, if you burn my flag, then I'm entitled to burn you. What goes around comes around. That's what I feel.
Vincent, did you want to answer that?
I don't think I can improve on that.
Just an interesting observation. Ever since Kaepernick decided to take a knee when they started playing the national anthem, you can take issue with our nation, you can take issue with all kinds of things. But ever since that happened, the NFL, which had been an absolute juggernaut in the ratings in my industry, where when you make millions and billions of dollars, everybody smiles and just walks to the bank, ratings have dropped for the NFL by 30%. Everybody now is scrambling, saying, what in the hell is happening here? And so they never thought this would ever happen, that would be the pastime on Sunday that we'd all watch. But clearly they've struck a nerve, and now they're trying to scramble and figure out what to do or why this is happening. And I think these two gentlemen just eloquently told you why it might be happening. More questions. What you got? Up there was a question. Yes, sir.
I'm Cadet Fitzsimmons from Virginia Tech. My question is for Mr. McEachin. What was it specifically about your experiences that really drove you to feel to share those through film and books and your screenplays? Like, what made you feel that had to be spread in that format that really gave you such a strong influence?
Well, if I understand the question correctly, it happened because I was wounded in such a fashion I couldn't take care of myself. And this blonde-haired boy came from virtually out of nowhere today, and after having gone back to Korea. Was it Jesus? I don't know. The only thing that I know is that I was saved. And fortunately, or unfortunately, you still have this shell in you that reminds you every now and then that there's a higher power that rescued you when you were in your darkest hour. If the guy, maybe that's why I saw some of these young guys last night. You could have been the guy. You could have looked that way. I mean, he could have. I never found out his name, and he never offered his name. I do recall saying, and I wrote it in the screenplay here, as he laid me down at the forward aid station, I said to him, "Hey, I never got your name." And we had been out struggling all morning long trying to get back to our lines, and this guy was just getting back to our lines. And today I never got your name, and he said, I never got yours either. And he said, well, maybe we should just keep it that way because names have a way of changing things. And I believe it does happen that way. I've never, I went back to my outfit. I went AWOL from the hospital, which is why I got the thing still stuck here. Because I wouldn't, I didn't want to live out my time in the hospital and then having it without thanking this guy. And I had to go and find him. I never found him, and my lieutenant was killed.
Question.
And it hurts.
Gentlemen, Cadet Waymiller, United States Military Academy. Sir, Mr. Okamoto, I had a question about the internment camps. I'm from Washington State, and we've replaced our, or what used to be our internment camp with now the State Fair. I wanted to know what your thoughts were on replacing or covering up historical areas that might be painful for us to remember because we were the ones that caused the pain.
I was just a kid. I was born in camp, so I have no independent recollection of it. So my impressions are based on the stories of my brothers and sisters. My mom and dad would never talk to me about it. In retrospect, it was unconstitutional. In retrospect, it caused a lot of pain and suffering that should not have been caused. But like anything else in life, we individually and collectively as a nation made mistakes, and that was a mistake. But what I am most grateful to my parents about is that instead of being bitter, being locked up for 3 years and having lost their homes and their businesses, they still said, this is our country, you were born here. We come from samurai stock, so we were warriors, and so when the country is at war, the warriors go to war. I've got no bitterness. I think it's a good lesson, though. We should try not to let emotions take over from sanity and common sense.
It's hard to imagine. I mean, if you've ever been out in the deserts of California, there's a huge camp out there as well. And I don't know if you can just imagine this. Your family, you, rounded up, put in a truck or a bus and taken out to this camp, not being told what's happened. And the next thing you know, you've been processed as an enemy of the state and stuck in a camp for 3 years. Your house, your business, your belongings, gone. And then after 3 years, they say, oh, we made a mistake. You can go back home. And then there's nothing to go home to. I mean, this is all a part of our history. So when he says a mistake was made, I think it's pretty clear for everybody. Now, we weren't there. You know, you're too young. I mean, how many of you were born and remember 9/11? I'm just kind of curious because how old were you, though? Give me an idea. 4, 5? 6. So December 7th, 1941, when the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor, this country went completely crazy. You had 15-year-old farm kids out of Manhattan, Kansas wanting to sign up in the Army but couldn't because they weren't old enough. Fast forward to September 11th, 2001. You had a lot of kids 15 on up that wanted to join. Our military ranks swelled because when you poke the bear responds. And that's what happened. So for you now to join up with some of that stuff really not burned into your psyche, I think it's a real testament to who you are and what you stand for. One thing I wanted to pass along, because I think I got to wrap it up. You know, my old man was military. I grew up in a military family as well. And he gave us great lessons in life. I grew up in the country, out in the desert, in the middle of nowhere, by Edwards Air Force Base. And, you know, racism wasn't a big thing at all in the country. You know, everybody did for themselves, and we didn't care what color you were. And that's what he said to us. He said, listen, you know, these are brothers and sisters that are around you, and I want you to look around and spend some time maybe shaking somebody's hand that's in a different branch or from a different academy. Get to know them, network, get to know each other, because the only color that really matters is red, and that's the blood you all share. It's the exact same color. The outside of you, it may be just a different wrapping. It doesn't matter. But what you are inside is blood, and you've got the warrior blood, which is fantastic. You can't find that. We can walk outside right now, and I can point to a dozen people that will never amount to anything in this life, and will never stand for anything. But we have two things in common. We're all going to pay tax, and we're all going to die. You want to check out a hero, or you want to just check out as a bum? You take the pick. Anyway, it's been a pleasure. Thank you.